if I can do this against all odds, anybody can do it, except that you have to have the resilience, the perseverance, the patience, and an intent that is not how do I make money, but how do I pursue my passion.
Welcome to Desi Roots and Routes, Pathways to Success of Indians in America, brought to you by the Roundglass India Center at Seattle University. I'm your host, Seetal Kalantari, a professor of law and director of the Roundglass India Center. I'm thrilled to welcome you to this space where we will learn about the incredible stories of Indians in America exploring their roots in India and the routes they took to become inspiring leaders in their fields. In our inaugural episode, we will speak to Singh, the benefactor who founded the Roundglass India Center. His story is one of perseverance and integrity. He takes us through growing up in India, finding passion in entrepreneurship, developing his philanthropic approach to life, and how astrology and fate even guided him in his path. Sunny, it is my honor to sit down with you today and discuss your story. I'd love to start at the beginning. How was it growing up in India? And can you talk about your parents a little bit?
Absolutely. So, I was born in Patiala, Punjab, but I grew up most of my young life in Delhi. And at a very young age, I was also in Ghana for 2-3 years because my father, being an international field hockey coach and player, he was deputed to go and coach the Ghana national team for men and women. So we ended up spending 3 years in Ghana when I think I was about 7, 8, 9 years old. But all my formative years were in Delhi. In my family, my dad being a sportsman, my mom was a homemaker focused on both the kids. There was one thing that in the house there was in abundance, and there was a lot of love. My mother basically lived for both the kids. And I didn't realize at that time, but as I grew up and I lost my mom in 2002, she was only 59, she died too young. It came back to me that how much she gave up her entire existence in life was us. And, that's not an easy thing to do. When we think about, is my existence about my kids? It is, but it's also not because I do so many other things. I say how important we were and how much she sacrificed. And she was the best cook. Her food was the best. The love in the house was unconditional. And one thing she was always very particular about was, how do we get the kids the best education? She was always about how do we get them the best school possible. And she'll be doggedly focused on education, love, good food, feeding us. And so when I look back and I said how much she sacrificed, I am just awestruck that I'm not even, I think, 100 the parent she was. And my dad, on the other hand, he was like, Sonny, do whatever you want to do, kind of deal. It was like I could shape my life any which way I wanted to. And when I look back, and my dad's 93 now, when I look back at how he did parenting, he basically led by example. He was a man of very high integrity. He was a true sportsman at heart. He played hockey for the love of it. There was no money in it. And there was no career in it, so to speak. And he is an international level hockey star, one of the top 30 of his times in the country. And India, hockey is India's sport. And so he was, and I sometimes think, I'm competitive. And I said, why am I competitive? Because my dad is so even-keeled, very calm. My mom was a very calm person because my dad was a tremendous hockey player and he loved the challenge of competing with the best and playing his best. And so I figured out my mom and dad later in life, when I was 40 plus, than when I was growing up. And I said, my dad gave so much, in terms of integrity, in terms of sportsmanship, in terms of, how do you treat people, how do you build teams. He was a great scout. He produced like 15, 16 Olympic players. And my mom was just an awesome mom, just said, hey, whatever is needed by the kids, I'll give that. And so when I look back at the family life of mine growing up, we never had much money. We were one month to month. But by golly, I didn't miss a beat. I didn't miss anything in my life that I feel I did not have. It's almost like I could do anything I wanted. It was just up to me. And that's a tremendous gift I think any child can get, that the ability to think that what you want to do is only up to you now. And nobody's hindering you, nobody's pushing you one direction or the other, et cetera, et cetera. So I feel pretty blessed that way. And I only realized that later in life. And I then try to say, okay, how can I do the same for my kids, what my parents did for me?
Well, sounds like you had the right ingredients to build the fruitful life that you're now living. I've also loved meeting your father. Talking to him is so inspiring. I could spend hours just listening to his stories. I can see how he played such a formative role in your development. And of course, your mother was also instrumental in ensuring that you focused on education, which then led you to one of the best schools in India, an IIT. And through the rigorous programs at the college, you became equipped to endure any challenge that life threw at you. Shortly after you graduated from college, I heard that life took a surprising turn after you met with an astrologer. Can you tell us how the stars eventually led you to the United States?
I was with a friend of mine in Delhi, a very good friend of mine. We went to school together. He comes from a very privileged background. And we were hanging out at a so-called sleepover at his place. I stayed at his place overnight. And in the evening, he said, Sonny, I'm going to take you to my astrologer. We're going to figure out if you're going to be a pauper or a king. And, I'm a 22-year-old kid. I brushed it off. I said, sure, it'll be fun. And I had forgotten about it. In the morning, we were having breakfast with his family and everybody together. And then saying, hey, Sonny, get ready. We're going to go to the astrologer. And I said, sure. I didn't remember it. And then he took me to astrologer in a place called Jama Masjid in Old Delhi. And we went to this astrologer called Panditji. And of course, that's how you refer to them. And he was squatting on the ground. And we said hello to him. And we sat down on the ground with him. And he asked me for a few things, your time of birth, your date of birth, and your place of birth. And he produced a horoscope. And that was the first time I ever produced a horoscope. So I wasn't into it. And it took half an hour. And then he looks up after he produces a horoscope. And he looks at my friend, looks at me, and then looks back at my friend. And the first sentence he said was, he's going to leave you way behind. And that was the beginning of the end of my friendship with him, because it didn't sit very well with him, because he came from a very privileged background. He says, who is this poor guy over here who's going to usurp me? But jokes aside, he said, you're not going to stay in India. You're going to leave India and you're going to go abroad. And I had no intention of doing so. So the very fact he planted a bug in my mind, I said, okay, well, I come from a very humble background. I couldn't even afford an air ticket, let alone college in the US. And I had not applied to any universities. I was too late. And so I went to this United States Education Institute, and many cities in India have it, and they all have all the college information and whatnot. And I started researching colleges, and I applied to maybe 8 or 9 of them. And then one of them gave me a full scholarship. That was Montana State. And, I was so, carefree or even careless, I say. I didn't even look at Montana on the map. All I knew was somewhere in the north, and I landed up in Montana in March in my T-shirt. And so that was my entry point into Montana. And I feel blessed going to Montana for a couple of reasons. Getting grades was easy because I came from a very competitive school. And so getting grades, and it was not an issue. And I did 2 masters over there, one in industrial engineering and one in computer science. But the highlight of Montana was beautiful place. It's God's country. It's one of the most gorgeous places in the world. It's a bit more commercialized right now when I was in Bozeman, etc. But beautiful place, made a lot of friends, made friends easy. And because grades were easy, I took all kinds of fun stuff. I did fashion classes, I did dance classes, I took equestrian classes, I took skiing classes. Anything that Montana offered me to have fun, I did it. And so the whole experience of coming to another country, making new friends, experiencing the education system, experiencing all the fun activities, it was like I was on a paid vacation for 3 years. And I have the fondest memories of Montana. It gives me goosebumps when I think about those 3 years. And I learned a lot because you suddenly get planted from one country to the other, you come half the world away. It's like I tell people, traveling is the best education, the best learning, and the best experience you can have in life. And I traveled half the world away to a country, to a place, to a state, and to a city, which very few people get to experience outside of that place, especially if you're not from the US. And so I consider myself very lucky.
So from Patiala to Bozeman, right?
That's right.
With no knowledge of America, no friends, no shoulders of lots of Indians to stand on, which is what people have today in many instances when they come as students or as people. What challenges did you face?
There was a time when a computer got missing in the computer lab. And I was the admin assistant or the teaching assistant for the lab. And somehow a professor or maybe 2 thought that I might have done that. I might have stolen the computer. And the way I came to know about it, because there was a white American colleague, a student, and she came to me and said, Sunny, this is the situation. So here is, think of the dichotomy, right? A professor thinks that I stole the computer, and a white American comes to me and saying, Sunny, this is what they're thinking, and I'm so pissed about it. Because she was very unhappy that they were casting apprehension on me that, look, he might have done it. And she was pissed at them. And so I said, wow, look at that. Similar people, but different attitudes. And of course, they saw it all out because they realized that they had totally mistaken it and it was a wrong judgment on their part. But they never came and apologized to me for talking to me and saying, hey, did you do it? Which was very interesting. And my fellow students were very upset. And of all people, a white American fellow student was the most upset. She said, this is bullshit. And then she then went and talked to them and she gave them her peace of mind. And I said, look, I have similar people on two ends of the spectrum, one professor here and one fellow student, and she hardly knew me because I was maybe 6 months into the program. But she stood and saying, no, this guy is not capable of doing something like this. And it gave me an insight into how people's minds work. And maybe because I was Indian or whatever that is, and I'm sure I faced discrimination because I was wearing a turban. I was the only probably turban guy in all of Montana, but I never felt it. Even when this happened with the professor, I said, okay, well, they made a judgment. They realized they were wrong. Who cares? And I forgot about it. Only when I think about it does it come back. But I never thought about it even after that. And I just lived my life. I said, this is just another challenge. Life is testing you and preparing you for the future. And you take the challenge head on, just another road bump. You deal with it and you move forward. You learn from it. You deal with it. You move forward. And I think if you take that attitude, then life is an experience. Live it.
And that's such an important lesson that, when you come to a place where you look different, whether it's the color of your skin, and for you, you were wearing a turban as someone from the Sikh religion. And I think that's right. When I've seen people who've dealt with adversity, you always saw the positive. You saw the positive of the students that were supporting you rather than the negative of the professors that were pigeonholing you or really profiling you. So I think that is a trait that is so important to anyone who becomes successful in a place where they don't exactly fit in like everybody.
That's true. So yeah, many challenges, but none of them, not even a single of them, ever bothered me more than a day or two.
And Sunny wasn't the only one. During the 1980s, we saw the first tech boom in the greater Seattle area. At that time, a wave of Indian immigrants came to our region. But this wasn't the first time that Indian immigrants landed in the Pacific Northwest. Nalini Iyer, a Seattle University English professor and author of the important book Roots and Reflections, South Asians in the Pacific Northwest, is an expert on the immigration history of Indians to our region. We'll hear from her throughout this season. So Nalini, when did the first Indians come to the Pacific Northwest?
In the late 19th century, people started coming, soldiers usually from the British Army, mostly from Punjab, largely Sikh and Muslim, some Hindu, but in the terminology of the time, they were all referred to as Hindus. And by 1904-05, they were starting to come south into the United States. It was a largely male migration because we are talking about increasing exclusion being performed by, the immigration regime, both in Canada and in the United States. And if you look at the work of people like Karen Leonard and Joan Jensen, who write quite extensively about this history of West Coast migration, many of the men from Punjab who eventually ended up settling in the Imperial Valley around Yuba City and became farmers, they were not allowed to own land, and the anti-miscegenation laws in California precluded them from marrying white women. They couldn't leave and go back and bring wives from India because of the immigration regime. So many of them actually married Mexican women and owned property in their names. And there is in California a Mexican Indian community about whom Karen Leonard writes wonderfully in her book, Making Ethnic Choices. And then Chitra Divakaruni has written poems in Leaving Yuba City about this community as well. So there are both literary and historical works that look at this moment.
So the first migration of the Punjabi community comes from Canada through Bellingham in early 1900s, and the community is violently removed because of backlash for their work, for the racism exhibited against them. But then there's another wave, right, in the 1980s as a result of what's happening in India.
Of Sikhs, yes, in the 1980s, because in 1984, after the assassination of Indira Gandhi by her Sikh bodyguards, which followed her violation of the sanctity of the Golden Temple in the view of the Sikhs, that was by sending the Indian army in. It was sacrilege. The argument that the government made was that it was for security purposes. Either way, then when she was assassinated, the violence that followed against Sikhs, where government officials were complicit in sharing electoral rolls and things so that mobs could actually identify where Sikhs were hiding and attack them. Yeah, that led to another massive outmigration from India and the Punjab of Sikhs to other parts of the world because it was not safe for them in India. And and people who have written about that moment have talked about how the violence was reminiscent of the kind of violence that people had experienced in 1947 during the partition. So it was brutal, it was bloody, justice has still not been served in that context.
And then the tech boom in Seattle in the 80s, 90s plays a big role in attracting Indian immigrants to the Pacific Northwest, right? And continues really to the extent that in Washington State, Indians now are the sort of second largest foreign-born community after Mexican Americans.
So let's talk a little bit about this. I think one of the differences with the tech migration, so in 65, many of them were still scientists and doctors and so forth because we were doing the skills-based migration. But when people came, then they would get jobs, then they wanted to apply for green cards and then become citizens, right? So that was the trajectory. And in the 80s, many of these folks who had become citizens were starting to sponsor their siblings and others to come. So that was a sort of another migration wave. But in the 90s, with the tech boom and the job market opening up, the companies were starting to hire people who had come in to graduate school and so forth. But the labor demands were much higher than what could be met through that one route. So the use of the H-1B visa becomes the most powerful tool for bringing people from India to work here. And one of the challenges, as you know, and my co-author Amy Bhatt has written about this in her book High Tech Housewives, is that H-1B migration was largely male. And so there were many women who were equally qualified as their partners, but who couldn't work because they didn't have work permits, who then experienced psychological, economic, and other losses because of that. And, people on H-1B visas, their path to a green card has been tortuous and long. And at this point, it takes decades for people. So they are, for all practical purposes, living here, working here, paying taxes, being wonderful citizens, raising children, but they do not have the pathway to citizenship via a green card because of the number of green cards that can be issued by country. We haven't changed that number in years. So it actually causes a lot of duress. And these are people we have a large number culturally, visually. When I go to my local Costco in Kirkland and I hear more Tamil there than I hear in my own household.
That's funny.
This is a very, very large Indian presence here. However, there is a lot of anxiety and precarity for people on H-1B visas. So one of the complexities in the present time is that we have large numbers of Indians, but we also have a large number of people who are starting to fall into the undocumented status because of the vagaries of the H-1B as one of the factors. So the immigrant community's contours have shifted, I would say, from the 60s and 80s.
Wow, it's incredible to understand that history. And also a little bit surprising to know that some of the immigrants who have been working in the tech industry and in other specialized jobs have been struggling for decades to find a pathway to citizenship in the United States. Thank you, Nalini, for your insights. So, Sunny, you are in Montana, but then you eventually land up 500 miles away in Seattle. Can you tell us how you ended up there and some of the early career steps that you took?
So the reason I moved to Seattle was when I was in college, I went to Alaska to work one summer because I was trying to do every job possible to make money, and because I wanted to send money home to my parents so they could feed themselves properly and at least have a semblance of a life. And so, while going to Alaska, I went to Seattle, and I really loved the city on both going out and coming in on the way to Alaska and Montana State. And so I said, my next move out of Montana will be Seattle. And so I did my first job in Montana. I got my green card in Montana. And when I got my green card, I said, okay, because I'm from a big city called Delhi, I said, look, I'm cut out to be in a Montana was like a paid vacation. I need to move to a bigger city. And Seattle was my first, second, and third choice. Maybe it was destiny. And I moved to Seattle, and I worked 3 jobs before I started my own venture. One was in an international logistics company called Expeditors. 2 jobs over here, one in Montana, but the other one was with Microsoft. And I realized in doing my first and second job that I was not thriving there, and I was not having fun. I was not really doing well. And I said, how come, I'm not a dumb guy. I might not be the smartest guy in the room, but I'm not a dumb guy. I work very hard, but I'm not really showing excellence in my work. I was not really happy with what I was doing and with my productivity and my work. In both my first jobs, first and second, one in Montana, one in Seattle, after 1 year, I was asked to leave and saying, hey, Sonny, we'll give you a great reference, go. And as stubborn as I was in both the jobs, I said, no, don't worry. I'm going to work really hard. I'm going to prove you that I'm really good, and I'm et cetera, et cetera. And I did 3 years in both the jobs. But in my second job, I started thinking that this cannot be the way one's going to live, that you're doing something and I'm not happy. My managers are not very convinced that I can do the job for them, and they're asking me to leave. So I did a lot of soul searching. And so I said, how about I do my own venture? And I didn't understand the concept of VCs and fundraising. I said, I got to start my own company and do whatever I have to do, but I have to do it myself. And so the whole journey of being an entrepreneur started invading my mind in my second job. And so till the age of 32, having gone to good schools in India, having gone to IIT, having experienced Montana and Montana State, and having experienced 3 jobs, it was the age of 32 that I discovered my purpose in life, that what actually wakes me up in the morning. And so I tell youngsters, I said, if you're 17, 18, 19, 20, what a beautiful age to experiment and explore, right? If I can start my life at the age of 32 with purpose, and I came out okay on the other end, if you're 20, I will leave no stone unturned. I will explore everything, all kinds of stuff, all over the world, and saying, what is it that really gets me up in the morning? Don't settle for something that is second best. Don't settle for something because somebody else thinks you should do it. Explore, and you will find your passion, and then you're going to find your love.
Yeah. And, you'll never really be truly happy if you're not doing what you love. And many of them say, well, I don't know what I love. And like what you said, your advice is, well, then try multiple things. Sometimes you can't know until you do it. And you took such a big risk to go from, a big, stable, stock option giving company like Microsoft, where you couldn't succeed, to founding a healthcare company that became a unicorn and subsidizing it through, right? I mean, and financing it the way you did. Can you talk about that journey?
Yeah, so my first company is called EdFX. It was a health tech company. And it has a very interesting story. When I started the company, I knew the industry really well, but I was not a business guy. I had not managed teams. I was not a high-flying executive. And so I took my credit cards, I took some consulting money, I poured all of that into it. And I lived in a small 2-bedroom condo, which was, 1 bedroom to sleep in, the other bedroom was the office. And I did everything from there, all my meetings and customer support, et cetera, et cetera. But I took all of that and I started the company in 1996. And, lo and behold, 5 years into the company, we were on the verge of bankruptcy. Why? Because I was not the business finance guy, which is very imperative for every company to understand business and finance. So everything I learned in life was pretty much those early years of EdFX, and the 6 months of EdFX, we were on the verge of bankruptcy. But I started the company, took some of my friends, they worked in the evenings and part-time, they built the product for me, and I did everything except for writing code. And I was customer support, I was marketing, I was product management, I was sales, all of that. And then over time, we built the team as the revenue started coming in. The fact that I took a concept, used my credit cards to fund the company, leveraged my friends to work free for equity, went through on the verge of bankruptcy in 1999, didn't declare bankruptcies, survived that, and then 9/11 happened, which is icing, the whole country came to a halt. And then from there, recovering from that really bad downward spiral, and I'll tell you how bad it got, to then, recovering from all of that by 2005, and a few years after that, it became a unicorn. If I can do this against all odds, anybody can do it, except that you have to have the resilience, the perseverance, the patience, and an intent that is not how do I make money, but how do I pursue my passion? And I'm going to give it all. And I'm going to be the one who will get paid the last, will eat the last, and I will steer the ship to safety.
Again, this is so instructive, the recipe for success that you had, which is love what you do, work hard, sacrifice as a leader. Don't be, as you say, the first to eat, but show people that these are the sacrifices we all make to get where you want. And love where you work, right? Make it a fun working environment. Yep. So that's just all really incredible. Since Edifix, you have now kind of left that venture in a way. Maybe you have some involvement, but you founded another company that is both a business-oriented, but also you're giving back through the Roundglass Foundation. Can you talk about this idea that came about with this new company, how you might have been inspired by your childhood or lessons you learned from Punjab or your wisdom to create this holistic well-being company?
Yeah, so after, Seetal doing Edifix, I keep using the word a humbling experience. There was no pride or gusto or ego. They're saying, gosh, we came out okay. And we did right by people. We did right by our customers. We did right by our people. And I don't know if I think I was always like this, but now I had the resources to and the faculties and the wherewithal to do it. I believe that to whom much is given, a lot more is expected. If the universe gives you X in experience, in financial resources, etc., you have to give 100X back to the world. And that's the only reason you get X. You don't get, yes, enjoy your life, buy the house you want to, buy the car you want to, which is fine. At the end of the day, you can drive one car, you can live in a house, you can eat only so much good food and so many vacations you're going to take. That's the limited amount of money you're going to spend. But you have to look at society at large and saying you got blessed, that you were put on a pedestal. But that happened to you because you have to use that same pedestal to saying, how can I lift others? And that should be the commandment for everybody. And for me, it was like, what can I do for the world? And healthcare made me look at well-being as a way to live, because I didn't like the healthcare system I saw in our country here. For a lot of parts in the world, the healthcare, if you look at our country, best science, best doctors, best machinery, but a lousy healthcare system. And so in spite of having everything at our beck and call, we can't take care of our people that well, our citizens that well. And $4 trillion is what we spend. And so I did a lot of soul searching. If I'm going to do something, it has to be revolutionary. It has to be global, directly impact human beings. And so therefore, the whole concept of how do we care for people? How do we care for people in terms of not as a business, but as just system of care? Because healthcare wasn't doing it. I said, let's create a company on well-being. We show people how to live well. And in the process, make them whole. Focus on the whole person, mind, body, and soul, so they can live well. And I want to create a company where it was all about doing something for society. So enabling holistic well-being for the world, for humanity, was one charter. And on the other, the giving charter, which is our social charter, was how can you enable well-being in different segments of society with different initiatives. So we started the giving unit where we have some big initiatives in India around biodiversity, about kids and learning, immersive learning, kids and sports, the environment around planting trees and waste management. We have many initiatives around sports. But take youth, take women, take the environment, and make them whole. If you look in the villages of Punjab, for example, they don't have the best teachers because the best teachers are not going to the villages and teaching. They say, how can we get learn pals from all over the world and show them communication skills, problem-solving skills, thinking outside the box, rationalization, etc. On the other hand, we looked at women and said, how do we enable women equity? Not women empowerment, women equity. They have talent, they have determination, they have all the same things anybody else has. So you give them access, you give them access resources, capital, mentorship, etc. And then you get out of the way and then let them dance. And so I call that women equity. So I don't believe in the word empowerment. I believe in the world of equity, access to all. So we're doing that with kids. I believe that show them how the world works. So they get excited about the world and they become curious, joyful learners. We're doing that. We said, if they're doing drugs, let's purpose them. Let's give them sports. Let them come out and play sports. Girls and boys playing sports in the villages. We enabled that. We said, the soil in Punjab is because the Green Revolution is really polluted. Water tables are really depleted. I said, let's plant 1 billion trees in Punjab in 20 years. Let's do waste management so there's no garbage dumps in villages. Let's start regenerative farming. We created many sports academies in India, focused on holistic development of the athlete so that the athlete comes, plays their heart out, but we secure the future by saying your first job is on us. Whether you become a professional athlete or you get your job with the corporate, you come work for Roundglass, first job is on us. But till then, we will protect you, we'll care for you, we'll train you, we'll educate you. Now, this is a different paradigm of how we look at stuff. And each initiative being 20 years. And I said, Roundglass is going to stay in service of humanity, will get institutionalized to outlive me. I'm the only one investing in it. No other investors, there's no exit strategy, that we don't have to appease anybody, there's not going to hit an IPO, we're not going to sell the company, it's going to get institutionalized to do God's work by enabling holistic well-being for all on one side and doing well-being initiatives for that segments of society which we know, we are passionate about, and in the process we show others that you can do the same thing too.
This is just incredible what you're doing. I've seen you and known you now for several years and watched all the philanthropy you've done. One of the things you've done is you've founded a center on India at Seattle University called the Roundglass Center, which focuses on India-US relations as well as on philanthropy here. So with all of this package of work, what I want to know is, why are you spending your time doing this giving back?
Yes, so my dad has asked me the same question, saying, Sonny, where are these ideas coming from? And you're doing all of this stuff. Of course, he's very proud. And I said, Dad, I have no idea. I think I'm a medium. I'm just a messenger. I'm just doing stuff and things are coming from somewhere else in the world and coming through me and I'm doing God's work. But I also look back at my life. For me, I love to fight for the common man. I love to fight for the common woman. I love to fight for that common that person on the street and saying, help me elevate my life, help me do better for me and my family. And so because I carried that thought in my mind, and the fact that I was just one of those few people who got lucky. The people who have worked very hard in their lives and whatnot, I got lucky. There must be a reason why the universe or God or whatever you want to call that force brought the luck into my life, whether it's my parents' karma, whether it might be my previous life, I do not know. I said, I'm blessed with all these things that have come into my life, great experiences, great people. For me, if I'm going to bed happy, knowing somebody's unhappy is unacceptable to me. That is absolutely unacceptable. If there's disparity between the have and have-nots, it is just not good for the haves. It's not good from a civic society perspective, a peace of mind perspective, and just from a human value perspective. If you know somebody's hurting, it is a moral obligation to do something about it. Not everything takes money. Most of the things don't take money. It takes your time. And so my take was, this is what I want to do because I can. This is what I love to do. And it gives me joy. It gives me satisfaction.
That's so amazing and inspiring and something that many, many people will look up to, but can learn from. How do we take this message of giving back that you feel and the passion you feel and share it among the larger Indian American community? Their stories are abundant. My dad came with $76 50 years ago, lived in a hostel, left all of us back in India, grew up with my grandparents. Now he has achieved something and able to, send me to college. I'm able to do that because of him, but we're still very frugal. He's still a Marwadi. He comes from a Marwadi background and doesn't really, they have a challenge giving back, spending money. So how do we inspire others to do what you're doing?
So two thoughts come to mind, Seetal. And you have endured the same story. You know what it feels like and what it is and what the experience is, with your father coming here and working hard and you growing up in India, et cetera, et cetera. Well, you lived that life too. And so you will understand and appreciate this a lot more than those who haven't. I think two things have to be done. One is Indian Americans who are doing good work from a society perspective, we should put the spotlight on them. Not because we want to showcase them. What we want to do is we want to showcase the others that you should be like them. It's not saying, oh, Sunny Singh, you're so great. No, look, Sunny is doing it. Why are you not? And then Sunny Singh saying, why are other people not joining the journey with me? It's a fun journey. It's a really delightful, fulfilling journey. It gives you a lot of joy. It gives you a lot of fulfillment. It gives you happiness. It gives you a sense of, my life matters in this world. I'm not living for myself. I'm living for the world. It's a beautiful feeling. So once put the spotlight on people who are doing good work. And second is, I urge the India diaspora, the Indian Americans and the Indians coming from contemporary India, that get involved in the local issues. Wherever you are, it doesn't matter how busy you are, how rich or poor you are, what talent you have and you don't have. Every one of us can do something for somebody else. And get involved in local issues. If you're living in Bellevue, get involved in Bellevue. If you're living in Seattle, get involved in Seattle issues. If you're living in California, wherever you are, get involved in the local issues and tell people that the well-being of that community where you belong to matters to you, and you're going to take those problems and help solve them. If you do those two things, I'm telling you, the entire country look at Indian Americans saying, we are so happy that you have chosen to come here, be part of the fabric of our society, and help uplift our country. And we should show people, this country matters to us, the people in this country matters to us, the well-being of this country matters to us. And if you do those two things, I think everybody will be happy. And it'll be a great, diverse, it's like the most beautiful rainbow you can see, you're going to see that in America.
Amazing vision you have. And you're leading by example, both in your private company and in your philanthropy. You talked about local, right? So giving back locally. You give back internationally. You give back globally. What's specific about Seattle and the greater Seattle community? How do you interact with that? What's special about being here?
This part of the world is the Northwest, Seattle, greater Seattle, Bellevue. It's one of the most beautiful places in the world. And it has great people from all walks of life, from all parts of the world. And, I never forget that to live in the Northwest, to have such great nature around us, to have such great people around us, why would we let this deteriorate? And if something can be done, let's do it. And so because I live in Bellevue, or the Seattle Bellevue area, so to speak, this region, and there are things that can be done that I can enable, that I can assist with, I started identifying those areas. So while we're doing stuff in India, while we're doing stuff between the state of Washington and India, we're doing beautiful stuff through the India Center, and even more so in the future, issues that affect Bellevue and issues that affect Seattle, I believe it's imperative for somebody like me to look at these local issues and saying, what am I going to do about it? Yes, I come from India. I have two homes. I consider US my home. I consider India my home. India, for my formative years, America gave me an opportunity to thrive professionally. And therefore, the India Center came about, and how the India diaspora and the Indian Americans can get more involved over here. And so my mind is always about, how can I help locally? How can I help my two homes? How can I help the people I understand? I understand the people of America. I understand the people of India. That's my sweet spot. And because that's my sweet spot, then I have to do things that pertain to my local community, to my country called the US, and to my other home called India. I have to enable things in this jurisdiction. And for that, I'll work tirelessly for the rest of my life. And I'm happy doing it, and it gives me a lot of joy. Thank you for giving me the mic and getting the message out. And for all the wonderful work that you are doing with the India Center. You're so all in. The only reason I tell everybody, the only reason I created the Roundglass India Center, Seattle University, was you. If it wasn't you, this would not have happened. So thank you for what you do.
You are too generous. Thank you, Sunny, so much for those incredibly kind words. Your outlook on life and the success you've found is an inspiration. I'm grateful to have your support in creating the Roundglass India Center, guided by your vision, and to be able to continue to both educate and work towards our shared goal of positive social, economic, and political change for all in our community. And to our listeners, thank you all for joining us on this episode of Desi Roots and Routes. We hope to see you on our next journey. So be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and follow us on social media to stay updated. Let's celebrate and learn from the inspiring leaders who bridge cultures and make lasting impacts. Until next time, keep building bridges and creating connections.